That's good, that. Here it is, Ray. Don't move. Don't move.
Y'all, this isn't a story of a comeback. This is the sound of a woman emerging from ruins while the world stares, shocked and uncertain. After losing everything and everyone who tried to reach her, Teyana Taylor didn't break down on camera. She didn't plead for empathy. She chose silence, the riskiest move in the ruthless world of celebrity. First, there was a man, Shumpert. Marriage, family, a love story the public devoured. Then came the fracture. Divorce headlines, smiles masking fractures too deep for cameras to capture. The internet predicted resilience. Strong. Women always appear unbreakable until the moment they aren't. Then came Aaron Pierre, a gentler chapter, red carpet moments, fleeting glances that spoke louder than words. Fans whispered, "This is the healing, the closure, the peace she deserved." But peace proved fragile. Another split, another vanishing act, no interviews, no explanations, just haunting silence and sorrow bleeding through cryptic posts. And then, abruptly, the world shifted. Teyana Taylor announced a new relationship. No name, no face, no evidence. Only one bone-chilling line. "This time, I'm protecting my peace." That single sentence detonated the internet. Comment sections erupted like crime scenes. Fans turned into amateur detectives. Screenshots were scrutinized, reflections analyzed, every luxury jet, every opulent hotel, every glittering watch turned into supposed evidence. And then the narrative warped, twisted into something darker. She upgraded. Another wealthy man. Gold digger whispers. The very same woman who had poured her heart into a marriage, who dared to love again and lost, was suddenly on trial. But here's what nobody can explain. She didn't respond. Not once. No denials. No justifications. No tears. Only calm, cold, calculated silence. And that silence? Terrifying. Because whispers from those close to the scene suggest this man isn't merely wealthy. He's powerful, deeply connected, and if his identity were revealed, certain names in the industry could vanish overnight. This isn't just a relationship announcement. This is a ticking emotional time bomb. The identity remains hidden. The truth remains buried. And when it finally surfaces, it won't be romance the internet discusses. It will be devastation.
Oh, don't move, you're moving. Don't move.
In celebrity culture, silence is never empty. It's loaded. It waits. It observes. And when it finally breaks, it obliterates narratives the world assumed were settled. This story doesn't start with romance. It starts with collapse. Long before headlines reduced her to speculation and timelines, Teyana Taylor stood out as something rare in entertainment. Disciplined, private, deliberate, a woman who constructed her image brick by brick, refusing to trade chaos for clicks. That restraint commanded respect. It also made what came next far more ruthless. Her marriage to Amon Shumpert was portrayed as balance, two public figures navigating love without spectacle. Family photos, quiet pride, a carefully maintained boundary between domestic life and public chaos. Fans believed it. Media reinforced it. The industry needed a story of functional love. Then, the cracks appeared. What the public noticed first wasn't scandal, it was distance. Distance. Subtle absences. Almost imperceptible at first. Fewer shared moments. The energy shifted before a single word was spoken. That's how these collapses quietly begin. By the time divorce headlines splashed across screens, the emotional toll had already been exacted off camera. And that's where the darkness creeps in. Because strength, when performed endlessly, slowly turns into isolation. After the separation, Teyana Taylor didn't unravel in public. She didn't weaponize interviews. She didn't flood social media with anger or despair. She did something far more dangerous in a culture addicted to spectacle. She withdrew. Silence became her shield, and, at the same time, her sentence. The internet does not forgive quiet women. It rewrites them, reshapes them, fills the void they leave with endless speculation. And then came the so-called rebound narrative. When Aaron Pierre stepped into the picture, the tone shifted immediately. This wasn't chaos. It was subtlety, controlled appearances. Few words, but body language speaking volumes. The kind of connection fans romanticize because it feels authentic, earned, not manufactured for cameras. People whispered, "She's healing. She deserves happiness. The pain is behind her." But rushed healing has a way of cracking open old wounds rather than sealing them. And so the relationship ended quietly, just as it had begun. No public blame. No dramatic exits. Only absence. And once again, Teyana Taylor vanished into silence. No clarifications. No closure for an audience that had emotionally invested without invitation. That silence, of course, became suspicious. Cryptic captions emerged. A weary look lingered in her eyes. Posts felt heavy with unspoken meaning. Observers projected their own theories. Grief transformed into narrative fuel. And the fire kept burning. Narrative fuel, once ignited, doesn't simply burn out. It consumes everything in its path. Here's the harsh reality of fame. When a woman doesn't explain her pain, the world decides the cause, and they rarely choose kindness. Months passed. The clamor dimmed into background static. The internet moved on, or so it thought. Because while attention wandered, something powerful was quietly forming behind the scenes. Then came the confirmation. No press tour. No exclusive interview. No photos. Only a statement. A new relationship declared on her terms, with a single line that shifted everything. This time, I'm protecting my peace. That line hit like a gavel in a courtroom no one realized was already in session. Protection implies threat. Peace implies past violence, emotional or otherwise. Suddenly, nothing about this announcement felt gentle. The absence of details became the story. No name, no face, no timeline, just boundaries. And in celebrity culture, boundaries are read as provocation. Fans didn't pause for facts. They hunted for clues. Every luxury location was dissected. Jewelry was scrutinized as evidence. Reflections, glass, fleeting glimpses. They became alleged sightings. Flights were tracked. Associations mapped. The internet had become an unpaid surveillance unit, convinced that the truth was hiding in plain sight. And then the narrative warped further. She upgraded. She only dates wealthy men. She's chasing status, not love. The tone shifted instantly, from curiosity to accusation. What made it worse was erasure. The same woman who had poured years into a marriage was reduced to a caricature. The same woman who endured heartbreak quietly was suddenly framed as calculating. In the court of public opinion, silence was no longer strength, it was guilt. But here's what stopped industry insiders cold. She didn't respond. No subtweets. No clapbacks. No carefully orchestrated PR cleanup. Nothing. And in gossip culture, silence after accusation is always interpreted as either collapse or control. Those close to the situation whispered that the secrecy wasn't about drama. It was about protection, not just of her heart, but of something far larger. Something that didn't belong on the internet. Something that, if exposed prematurely, could have repercussions far beyond comment sections. Theories multiplied. Some insisted the man wasn't in entertainment at all. Others claimed he wielded enough power to avoid visibility entirely by design. A few suggested that once his identity surfaced, it would force uncomfortable reckonings within elite circles that prefer darkness to daylight. Meanwhile, Teyana Taylor remained composed. No visible joy. No visible fear. Only calm. A calm that unsettled those expecting either celebration or collapse. Because when a woman stops performing emotion, she disrupts the systems built to consume her pain. This wasn't a reveal. It was a refusal. A refusal to explain herself. A refusal to feed the machine. A refusal to crumble under pressure. And that refusal carries consequences. Because when the truth is withheld long enough, a reveal doesn't merely inform, it detonates. Part 1 of the story isn't about who the new man is. It's about why his identity matters so much that it must be shielded at all costs. And if the whispers are accurate, when that name finally surfaces, it won't just shock fans, it will demand a reckoning. This isn't a love story. It's the opening statement of a much darker chapter. And the court of public opinion hasn't even realized the trial has already begun. The moment the confirmation dropped, the internet didn't pause, it lunged. Not with celebration, not with relief, but with suspicion sharpened into obsession. Because when Teyana Taylor confirmed a new relationship without offering proof, faces, or timelines, she violated an unspoken contract between celebrities and spectators. The public wasn't angry that she had moved on. They were angry because she hadn't asked for their permission. That's when the tone shifted from curiosity to prosecution. Every past chapter was dragged back into evidence. Her marriage to Amon Shumpert was no longer remembered as a love that had simply ended. It was reframed as a strategic alliance. Old interviews were clipped, smiles slowed and analyzed. Body language experts with no credentials suddenly had definitive conclusions. She was never really happy. He had always been holding her back. She had outgrown him. None of it was proven. All of it stated with absolute confidence. Then the rebound chapter reopened. Her time with Aaron Pierre was no longer seen as healing. It was recast as a test run. Commentators suggested he was a placeholder, reducing a genuine connection into a mere stepping stone towards something better. The implication was clear. Love had never been the goal. Elevation was. And in the ruthless economy of gossip culture, elevation always points to money and power. That's when the theories grew darker. Anonymous accounts hinted that the new man wasn't famous. He was insulated. Invisible not by choice, but by necessity. Untagged because his world didn't intersect with fan pages or red carpets. A man whose privacy wasn't curated, it was enforced. Screenshots appeared and vanished. Alleged sightings surfaced, then disappeared. Accounts went private overnight. And suddenly people noticed something chilling. No leak could stick. In an industry where secrets are currency, this one refused to circulate. Someone was actively containing it, and containment implies leverage. As speculation swelled, so did hostility. The question shifted. Who is he? Became, what is she hiding? The language turned loaded, accusatory, gendered. Old tropes resurfaced. Opportunist, climber, manipulator. The internet dusted off its oldest scripts and recast Teyana Taylor without hesitation. But here's the contradiction nobody wanted to confront. If this relationship was about clout, secrecy made no sense. If it was about status, anonymity was counterproductive. If it was about attention, silence was the wrong strategy. Unless, attention was exactly what she was actively avoiding. Observers close to the industry whispered that the calm wasn't indifference, it was discipline. This wasn't a woman overwhelmed by chaos. This was a woman deliberately starving it. Restraint forged the hard way, after years of being dissected for every survival choice made under pressure. And that's when the timeline began to matter. People noticed how swiftly she withdrew after each emotional rupture. How consistently she chose absence over explanation. How rarely she defended herself. Even when the narrative tilted against her, patterns emerged, not of manipulation, but of withdrawal as a method of self-preservation. Yet the internet does not reward restraint. It punishes it. Comment sections transformed into mock trials. Influencers monetized speculation. Podcasts built entire episodes on unnamed sources. The story metastasized beyond her control. Still, nothing from Teyana Taylor. No corrections. No clarifications. No visible strain. And that absence began to feel intentional, because silence, when sustained under assault, is not weakness. It's a statement. A statement that the truth does not require witnesses yet. Behind the scenes, something else was happening. Industry figures stopped engaging publicly. Posts were deleted. Mentions avoided. It was as if an unspoken line had been drawn, crossed only once. After that, the topic became radioactive. Why? Because for those paying attention, this wasn't merely about a relationship. It was about something far larger. Proximity. Access. A world where certain names never circulate casually because they carry consequences. And that's when fear crept in. If the man was powerful enough to remain unseen, what could exposure truly threaten? Careers. Partnerships. Reputations built on discretion. The narrative shifted again. Who is he? Became, why is nobody willing to speak? That is the question no one dares answer. Meanwhile, Teyana Taylor's demeanor never faltered. She appeared measured, focused, almost detached, not joyful in a performative way. Not defensive, only centered. a posture that unsettled those conditioned to expect emotional collapse. Because women who don't break on schedule disrupt the spectacle, and disruption invites backlash. Critics escalated, framing her silence as arrogance, avoidance, proof of something sinister. The very calm that suggested control was recast as coldness. Strength became threat. But the more aggressively the narrative pressed, the clearer one truth became. She wasn't playing the same game. This wasn't a rollout. This wasn't a rebrand. This wasn't damage control. It was containment. And containment only exists when something truly valuable requires protection. The irony was brutal. The internet demanded transparency from a woman who had already paid the cost of exposure. The public had demanded visibility from her life, and she had paid for it with her own story. They wanted access to something Teyana Taylor had clearly declared was no longer public property. And that decision carries consequences. Because when the reveal finally comes, and it won't land as gossip. It will hit as disruption. Disruption that forces people to rethink every assumption they've ever made. This isn't about romance anymore. It's about power dynamics. About who can vanish. About who is allowed to protect themselves without being punished for it. And as the noise intensifies, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Whatever this relationship represents, it was never meant for public consumption. The longer it remains hidden, the more explosive the fallout will be when it surfaces. Secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait. The breaking point didn't arrive with a name. It arrived with fear. By now, this story had outgrown mere gossip. It was no longer about who Teyana Taylor was dating. It was about who suddenly refused to be mentioned at all. Something shifted in the ecosystem. Accounts that had once speculated relentlessly went silent. Threads vanished midstream. Influencers promising exclusives quietly pivoted to safer territory. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't being ignored. It was being avoided. In celebrity culture, avoidance is always a tell. Because clout-chasing stories don't silence people. Power does. Behind closed doors, the tone shifted from excitement to caution. Publicists stopped returning calls. Bloggers began softening their language. Phrases like allegedly and unconfirmed multiplied overnight. Even the loudest voices began to whisper. Why? Because the closer anyone got to the truth, the stronger the resistance became. And resistance implies boundaries enforced by forces far beyond public opinion. The irony is sharp. For years, Teyana Taylor had been framed as resilient, yet accessible, a life laid bare, parsed, judged, consumed. Her marriage to Amon Shumpert had been public enough to invite commentary, but controlled enough to maintain dignity. When it ended, she paid the price quietly. No scorched earth tactics. No public warfare. Then came the second chapter. Her time with Aaron Pierre was treated as a mere rebound by outsiders who demanded a tidy narrative. When that ended as well, the audience felt entitled to answers she never agreed to give. What followed was punishment. The internet doesn't punish people for being wrong. It punishes them for withholding access. So when she confirmed a new relationship without offering details, it wasn't read as maturity. It was read as defiance. And defiance, especially from women who refuse to perform vulnerability, triggers a familiar response. Interrogate her, discredit her, reduce her. But something went wrong with that plan. She didn't fold. No defensive posts. No emotional monologues. No leaks to soften perception. Just continued silence. And that silence, paired with confidence, unnerved systems built on exposure. As the weeks passed, a new realization crept in. This wasn't a woman hiding something scandalous. This was a woman protecting something invaluable. The speculation shifted once more. This time, it wasn't about money or fame. It was about proximity, about circles that don't intersect with entertainment gossip, about people whose names aren't searchable because their influence operates entirely offline. That's when the word protected began to surface in private conversations. Not protected by PR, protected by structure. And that distinction matters. PR manages perception. Structure enforces consequences. If this man existed in a world where anonymity equates to power, exposure wouldn't be inconvenient. It would be disruptive. Not to fans, but to systems that thrive in invisibility. Which explains the strangest development of all. Nothing leaked. No photos from insiders. No blurry club shots. No friend of a friend confirmations. In an era where secrets survive minutes, This one persisted for months. That alone is proof of something different. Meanwhile, Teyana Taylor's public presence sharpened, not amplified. Her appearances were deliberate. Her words measured. She spoke of peace without explaining the struggle required to achieve it. She didn't sell happiness. She modeled boundaries. And that discomforted people, because the audience isn't trained to accept closure without disclosure. They want the arc, the narrative. They wanted the lesson, the emotional climax. But she refused to deliver it. So the internet tried to write its own ending. They framed her calm as calculation, her privacy as manipulation, her refusal to explain as arrogance. But none of it stuck because there was no contradiction to exploit, no public mistake, no visible crack. And that's when the narrative began to stall. Stories thrive on reaction. Outrage feeds on response. Without it, even the most aggressive speculation starves. The story didn't end. It paused. And that pause is far more dangerous. Because stalled narratives don't resolve, they linger. Industry observers began suggesting that when the truth finally surfaces, it won't come through gossip channels. It will arrive sideways, in a context nobody expects. Through association, not announcement. Through consequence, not confession. And when it does, it will force a total reevaluation of everything that came before. Why the silence mattered, why the secrecy was absolute, why certain people maintained distance. This isn't a reveal waiting for a headline. It's a reckoning waiting for the right timing. And here's the uncomfortable truth beneath it all. Teyana Taylor didn't lose control of her story. She reclaimed it, at the cost of being misunderstood, at the cost of accusation, at the cost of public comfort. Because control doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like restraint under fire. The internet craved spectacle. She offered nothing. And in doing so, she revealed something far more unsettling than any name ever could: the limits of access. Because when a public figure decides their life is no longer communal property, the backlash isn't about curiosity, it's about entitlement being revoked. This story isn't unresolved because information is missing. It's unresolved because consent was withdrawn. And until that consent is returned, if it ever is, the speculation will linger, suspended in discomfort, in uncertainty, in waiting. Because the most destabilizing truth of all is this: some stories don't belong to the audience. And this one was never meant to. This is the moment the story stops being entertainment and begins to feel personal. Because what you are witnessing isn't a celebrity protecting a relationship. It's Teyana Taylor refusing to bleed for an audience that had already decided how they would judge her. Every silence, every boundary, every unanswered accusation, each one a reminder that betrayal doesn't always come from lovers. Sometimes it comes from the very crowd that once swore they supported you. The internet turned her heartbreak into content, her restraint into suspicion, her healing into interrogation. And now, with the truth still hidden, the same voices demanding transparency are the very ones who weaponized her past. Her past. Marriage reduced to failure. Love reframed as strategy. Pain treated like proof of guilt. This isn't curiosity anymore. It's punishment for choosing peace over performance. And here's what makes it dangerous. If the reveal comes, it won't satisfy anyone. If it doesn't, the speculation never ends. Either way, she pays the price. That's the trap. A woman survives betrayal, learns restraint, chooses silence, and is still accused of deception. The audience doesn't want truth. It wants access. And when access is denied, it retaliates. So ask yourself this before the next headline drops. Who benefits from her exposure? Who profits from her pain? Who keeps pushing narratives while she remains silent? Because when this finally breaks, and it will, the shock won't come from a name. It will come from realizing how quickly empathy was replaced by entitlement, how easily support turned into surveillance, how comfort was demanded from someone who had already given too much. This isn't a love story waiting for confirmation. It's a warning about what happens when boundaries threaten an industry built on consumption. Watch closely. Not for the reveal, but for who disappears when the truth finally arrives.